Why is it that after awakening, after touching the eternal, after seeing beyond the veil, you find yourself staring at empty bank accounts, unpaid bills, and the suffocating weight of financial anxiety? How can something so sacred lead to such struggle? This is the paradox no one tells you about. The deeper your consciousness expands, the more alien the systems of society begin to feel. You wake up to the illusions of the world only to realize that you still live in it. You feel called to a higher truth, yet trapped by earthly survival. And this tension, it can break you, if misunderstood. But what if this struggle isn't a curse? What if it's a message? When you awaken, truly awaken, something radical shifts beneath the surface of your life. The structures that once held your identity begin to dissolve, and along with them, the scaffolding that supported your sense of value in the world. You no longer chase what others chase, and the rewards that used to inspire envy now seem hollow. You find yourself in a liminal space between the world you left behind and the world you have not yet fully entered. And in this threshold, money, perhaps more than anything, becomes a symbol of contradiction. Because while the spirit has soared into clarity, the body remains tethered to the earthly systems of exchange, labor, and survival. This is the dissonance many face after spiritual awakening. You begin to see the world as it is, not as a neutral place, but as a system built on illusion. And that realization, though liberating, can be paralyzing. It is one thing to awaken to the reality that the world worships false god status, consumption, domination. It is another thing entirely to function within that world without becoming enslaved by it again. Money, in this context, becomes not just a means of survival, but a symbol of every value you've begun to question. You hesitate to ask for it, to pursue it, to organize your life around it, because deep down, part of you fears that seeking financial gain means returning to unconsciousness. And so, without noticing it, you begin to starve not just physically, but psychically, not because you lack ability or vision, but because the internal compass that once pointed toward external achievement is now broken, and no one told you what to do once it stopped working. But the conflict goes deeper. The external struggle with money is rooted in something much older, an internal belief system that existed long before you earned your first paycheck. You inherited this. It was passed to you through language, through silence, through the expressions on your parents' faces when bills came due, or when success arrived. You absorbed your culture's myths about money before you had the consciousness to question them. Some were told directly, money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people are selfish. You have to work yourself to death to make ends meet. Others were less visible, buried in the emotional atmosphere of your upbringing. If your caretakers carried shame around finances, you'll likely carry it now. If you witnessed constant scarcity, you might feel guilty for wanting more of it, if that more is basic stability. And when you awaken, these inherited beliefs don't just fade, they come roaring to the surface. Because spiritual awakening is not just a revelation. It is a confrontation. The unconscious becomes conscious. And what you find there is not just divine light. It is shadow. All the voices, all the trauma, all the suppressed fears, and ancestral stories now exposed under the harsh light of awareness. So when you ask why you are financially struggling after awakening, you are really asking, what part of me still believes that I am not worthy of abundance? What internal programming still equates money with moral compromise? What shame still lingers in my bloodline, silently sabotaging my ability to receive? And this is where the myth of the starving mystic begins to take root. Somewhere in your psyche, consciously or not, you begin to associate holiness with deprivation. The more you detach from the material world, the closer you believe you are to truth. You admire saints and sages who lived in caves, who renounced the world, who walked barefoot and carried nothing but silence. But what you forget is that these figures were often supported by entire systems, monasteries, patrons, tribes. They weren't entirely alone. And more importantly, their rejection of materialism was not a rejection of abundance itself. It was a choice made in a specific time, for a specific purpose. When you unconsciously adopt this archetype, without understanding its roots, you imprison yourself in an outdated model of spirituality that no longer serves you. You begin to equate struggle with virtue. You feel guilty for desiring financial ease, as if comfort will make you forget who you are. And so you build a life of quiet self-denial. You do your soul work, but you don't charge enough for it. You create beauty, but hesitate to market it. You teach wisdom, but live paycheck to paycheck, telling yourself that this is the price of authenticity. But deep down, something doesn't feel right. Not because you need millions, but because your soul knows that poverty is not a requirement for purity. Your higher self understands that rejection of abundance is not the same as transcendence. It is often just another mask for fear. This fear, cloaked in spiritual language, whispers that money corrupts, that success compromises, that visibility is dangerous. And if you believe it long enough, you begin to sabotage yourself in subtle ways. You underprice your work. You procrastinate on launching your ideas. You attract situations that drain your energy without replenishing it, all while telling yourself that you're doing the right thing. But is it really right? Or is it just familiar? Is it truly divine guidance? Or is it unresolved trauma disguised as humility? When Carl Jung spoke of individuation, he spoke of the necessity of integrating the shadow. That includes the parts of you that long for security, stability, and yes, of wealth. Not for greed's sake, but because you are still human. You still exist in a body, bound by time, bound by needs. To reject these needs in the name of spiritual purity is to reject life itself. The goal is not to become ascetic, but whole. And wholeness requires integration of both the sacred and the mundane. It is possible, more than possible, to hold the light of awakening in one hand and a bank account filled by your gifts in the other. But to reach that place, you must do the inner work of unraveling the archetypes that govern your relationship with money. You must question where they came from. You must examine what parts of you feel safer in lack. You must become conscious of the parts of your soul that equate poverty with protection. Because until you do, the unconscious will continue to rule your material life, no matter how awakened your spirit becomes. And this is the paradox. Awakening brings clarity, but also chaos. You see through the game, but still have to play it. You leave the matrix, but the matrix still mails you bills. And unless you reconcile this tensionness, you learn to navigate the material world from a spiritually integrated place, you will remain in a state of internal war. One foot in the clouds, the other sinking in the mud. This is not a sign of failure. It is a stage. But it is not meant to be permanent. Struggle after awakening is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is proof that something inside you is evolving. That your old definitions of value no longer fit. That you are in the sacred in-between, a place of confusion, yes, but also of creation. A place where the ego dies, but the soul begins to live. And as you navigate this liminal space, the work is not to reject money, but to redefine your relationship to it. Not to chase it blindly, but not to run from it either. For money, like everything else in this world, is a projection of psyche. It reflects your beliefs, your wounds, your desires, your fears. And when you change internally, your outer world must recalibrate. But that recalibration takes time. It takes trust. And above all, it takes a willingness to hold both truths at once. That you are infinite, and you still have bills to pay. That you are divine, and still need food. That you are a soul, and still responsible for shaping your reality. This duality is not a contradiction. It is the gateway to true integration. And it is here, right here, in the tension between your spiritual awakening and your financial struggle, that your next evolution begins to take form. To awaken is not to escape the world, but to return to it with new eyes. There lies the illusion that enlightenment must sever us from the material, that transcending the ego means erasing all ties to the physical plane. But the truth is far more paradoxical, far more demanding. The real test of awakening is not how far you can flee from the world, but how fully you can return to it without losing what you found in the silence. The challenge is to integrate, to take the revelations of your inner journey and embody them in the marketplace, the household, the bank, the daily rituals of modern life. For if your awakening lives only in the clouds, only in the mountaintop experiences of solitude, then it is incomplete. It remains abstract, ungrounded, a truth unmanifested, and you were not born merely to know. You were born to become. There is a myth that to be spiritual is to be separate from society. But this myth, if left unexamined, becomes a cage. It breeds shame toward participation, shame toward structure, shame toward ambition. The material world is seen as inferior, even evil. But matter is not the enemy of spirit, it is its vessel. The body is not the enemy of the soul, it is its home. Likewise, money is not the enemy of truth, it is a symbol, a reflection. And symbols, Jung taught us, are powerful agents of the unconscious. They carry the charge of archetypal energy. When rejected, they do not disappear. They sink deeper into the shadow. This is why so many who awaken fall into financial hardship, not because they are less evolved, but because they have not yet integrated the symbol of money into their new world view. They have cast it into the unconscious, labeling it as unspiritual, dirty, or irrelevant. But what is denied in the light becomes a force in the dark. If you see money only as a corrupting influence, it will manifest that way in your life, because money has power, but because your unconscious beliefs do. Integration demands that you no longer split the world into sacred and profane. You must bring the sacred into the profane, illuminate the mundane with divine purpose. You must see that even currency, even contracts, even taxes, are part of the great collective psych symbols within a larger dream. And yet, there is a resistance. It is deep, ancestral. It is the fear of being seen. The fear of stepping into your own authority. Because once you align with abundance, once you claim your place in the world, the cloak of invisibility vanishes. You are no longer a quiet mystic. In the shadows, you are a force. And with that force comes responsibility. This is the threshold many fear to cross. It is not just fear of failure that paralyzes it. It is fear of power, of visibility, of being misunderstood, criticized, envied, imitated. The ego, once dissolved through awakening, quietly reforms under a new disguise. The spiritual ego, and it whispers, stay small, stay hidden. It is safer here. But staying small is not humility. It is fear. And that fear, if not brought into consciousness, will sabotage every attempt to expand. You will find yourself stuck in patterns, starting projects you never finish, attracting opportunities you cannot receive, circling the same terrain while telling yourself you are growing. But growth is not measured by knowledge alone, it is measured by embodiment. Are you willing to take what you know in the soul and build it into your life? Are you willing to speak, to create, to lead, even when the world does not understand? Are you willing to hold the tension between being true to your essence and navigating a society that may never fully reflect it? Responsibility is not a punishment, it is the container through which power moves. If you fear responsibility, you will unconsciously fear success, because with success comes the demand to hold space for others, for energy, for systems, for vision. You can no longer operate in isolation. You become a bridge, and a bridge must be strong on both sides, spirit and form, soul and structure. If one side is neglected, the bridge collapses. This is why some spiritual teachers fall into scandal, why some artists burn out, why some healers go broke, because they rejected the part of themselves that needed to learn boundaries, learn systems, learn how to hold power without being consumed by it. To integrate money is not to worship it. It is to understand it as a tool, a mirror, a form of energy that reveals who you are. If you avoid it, what are you avoiding in yourself? If you chase it, what void are you trying to fill? The answers are never purely economic. They are psychological. They are symbolic. The figures in your bank account are echoes of your self-concept, your lineage, your unconscious vows. Perhaps you once vowed never to be like your father, who was consumed by ambition. Perhaps you vowed to be the opposite of your mother, who abandoned her dreams for security. These vows, though made in childhood, still govern your adult choices, until you bring them into the light. Individuation is the process of becoming whole, not perfect, not transcendent, but whole. And wholeness includes the shadow. If your shadow contains fear of wealth, fear of leadership, fear of expression, then no amount of affirmations will change your financial reality. You must go inward. You must speak to the part of you that believes it is safer to stay small. You must sit with the shame, the guilt, the confusion, and let them speak. Not to indulge them, but to understand them. Only then can they be transformed. Only then can you make new choices, not reactive, not inherited, but conscious. And once that shift occurs, something remarkable begins to unfold. You no longer see wealth as something to conquer, but something to channel. You no longer resist structure, but use it as scaffolding for your purpose. You realize that money, in the hands of the conscious, is not a threat to the soul, it is an amplifier. It expands what is already there. If you are in integrity, it expands your ability to serve. If you are in shadow, it expands your capacity for destruction. The difference is not the money. It is the consciousness behind it. This is why redefining wealth is essential after awakening, not as excess, not as egoic achievement, but as alignment. Wealth is not a number, it is a frequency. It is the state of having what you need to fully live your purpose. For some, that may mean millions. For others, it may mean simplicity, time, spaciousness. The point is not to mimic someone else's version of abundance, but to define your own. To ask, what do I truly need, to feel supported, grounded, free? What resources must be in place for me to give my deepest gifts without resentment, without fear? And when that definition emerges, the path forward becomes clearer. You begin to take action not from panic, not from shame, but from alignment. You begin to see money as an ally in your individuation, not a distraction from it. You become capable of holding both the depth of your spiritual insight and the demands of physical life without collapsing into despair. And in doing so, you become a model not of perfection, but of possibility. You show others that it is possible to be awake and abundant, conscious and successful, grounded and free. But this requires courage. The courage to face the internal barriers. The courage to let go of identities that no longer serve. The courage to be seen in your fullness, not just your light. For when you are no longer hiding, you open yourself to receive not just money, but recognition, opportunity, impact. And that too is part of the work. To receive, to allow life to give back to you. To trust that you are not here to only serve, but to be supported as you serve. Receiving is not passive. It is an act of strength. It is the willingness to let the outer world mirror the value you hold within. If your inner world is filled with doubt, that mirror will show lack. If your inner world is filled with integrity, purpose, and self-worth, the mirror reflects that, too. But it must begin from within. No strategy can compensate for a belief system rooted in unworthiness. No marketing can overcome a psyche that secretly fears being seen. The work is not to fix the outside, but to illuminate the inside. And from that illumination, the external begins to shift. Not always overnight, not without effort, but inevitably. You are not financially struggling because you are broken. You are struggling because you are in the process of becoming whole. And wholeness is not linear. It requires descent before ascent. It asks you to pass through the underworld of your own psyche, to face the shadows you avoided while chasing the light. And in that descent, you find not only the source of your pain, but the source of your power. The part of you that can create, attract, and sustain a life that reflects your deepest truth. Not in theory, but in reality. Not someday, but here, now, on this ground, in this body, in this world you once tried to escape.